I'm Dr. Petra Illig, and I live in Alaska, but I grew up in farming communities in the Midwest. So when I moved here several years ago, I was surprised to find a vibrant farming community here in Alaska. Farming is hard, but it's particularly hard up here in the north where our growing conditions are not amenable to many traditional food crops. So I was very interested in developing a project where farmers could grow a crop that actually takes advantage of our harsh conditions. So please join me for a road trip as we're interviewing farmers scattered around Alaska who are growing Rhodiola rosea, which is a potential game changer for the Alaskan agricultural community. It's a medicinal plant that is highly valued and is indigenous to subarctic and alpine regions of the northern hemisphere. It has been used for thousands of years by circumpolar native peoples for its health benefits. So come with me and see what our Alaskan farmers are doing to look at their hopes and their dreams and their desires and their activities in cultivating this new crop, Rhodiola rosea.
I thought you just did pull or push. There we go. We are now doing A trip. And B trip, we're gonna set that to 0 too, but we're gonna go back to A trip. Okay. On the road again.
Is that gonna hold?
No, it's fine. Remember when we had to slam on the brakes and we had coffee in a glass container and it went flying off and shattered all over the floor?
Yeah.
All right, beautiful day in Anchorage. I forgot to oh shoot.
Do you want to turn back? We can turn back.
I forgot to process those roots. I need to put them in the refrigerator.
Okay.
I need to do that. Dang.
What's the trip odometer at so far?
0.1. All right. Well, at least I didn't leave the neighborhood yet, right? All right. And it starts again. It's always reassuring. We are going to go visit some of the best rhodiola growers in the state of Alaska on the Kenai Peninsula. Kenai has a little bit more of a maritime climate, so it's a little bit more humid. And even though the plants are succulents and they can tolerate drought, they don't grow very well if it's really hot and dry. So the Kenai is really nice. So we're going to visit Jonathan Peters, who is our most consistent and largest rhodiola grower to date. He grows beautiful plants. He takes care of them and does an excellent job. He's certified organic. This, I think, is his 4th harvest. Also a commercial fisherman, so he doesn't harvest this time of the year. He has to wait until fishing season is over. We're also going to visit Stasha Kalugan, who is a brilliant guy. He got into rhodiola early on, extremely observant, really tests out a lot of his theories and comes up with, just beautiful plants. And so we learn a lot from him and Jonathan. And then we're also going to visit Al Poindexter, who's my business partner in Alaska Rhodiola Enterprises, owner of Anchor Point Greenhouse. He's been doing greenhouse work and nursery work for decades, and he was one of the first people who thought, well, let me see if I can grow this plant. And then Al Poindexter also built a tincture manufacturing facility at Anchor Point Greenhouse. For the first few years, I was making tincture in my living room. We had only been in Alaska for a handful of years. My medical practice was slowly evolving. It takes time to become a known physician in the community. And so I had probably more time on my hands than I obviously do now. My daughter and I were invited to hang out in a cabin in the winter and go for dog sled rides. And so I took along a stack of my Science News. I think the article was titled "Warming Up to a Cold War Herb." And what resonated with me as a physician is that Rhodiola rosea has really interesting health benefits. This is a subarctic alpine medicinal plant that's been used by circumpolar peoples, and now I'm surrounded by northern indigenous peoples. And so I thought, well, I wonder if we can grow this in Alaskan farms, giving Alaskan farmers a crop that actually takes advantage of the environment, because currently they have to go through the expense of hothouses, greenhouses, tunnels, all kinds of expensive stuff to extend the growing season so that you can plant things. I also learned that most of the world's supply of Rhodiola rosea for the botanical industries worldwide comes from wild harvest. So primarily the villagers in the mountains of Siberia and the mountains of Central Asia, they would go up in the villages with their trucks and their shovels, and they would dig up these plants that were frequently decades old, because when they grow in their really harsh environments, so 3, 4, 5,000 feet up in these high mountains, they grow so slowly in those harsh conditions that they're often very old plants when they're dug up. And remember, it's a destructive harvest because it's the root that's used. So it's not like you pick the leaves and pick the berries and let the plant survive. So as rhodiola has become more popular in botanical medicine and herbal medicine, these plants were really being threatened to extinction. There's an organization called CITES, which stands for Convention of International Trade of Endangered Species, Flora and Fauna. If a plant or animal gets listed on that, it's internationally agreed upon that you can't trade that plant across international borders.
Why not?
Because it endangers the species to extinction, right? So you can't tell a country what they can and can't do within their country. But you can tell a country you can't sell it across borders. So in 2022, Rhodiola rosea, wild Rhodiola rosea, was put on this list. Certainly in the article I was reading, it was clear that, this was a plant that was vulnerable, right, to extinction. So I'm thinking about this and wondering, I wonder, how can we help farmers grow something, make some money, help this plant, and develop an industry in Alaska based on this plant?
We're at the Matanuska Experiment Farm, where the initial agricultural research took place in Alaska. And this is where we discovered that we can grow things in Alaska. And that goes back nearly 100 years. It was because of the research that had taken place at this facility that they knew that this was the best place to do agriculture in Alaska. And I think rhodiola will probably be the most important crop in Alaska in the coming years because it's so valuable. It's a high value crop that people can make good money off of for a relatively small amount of work. That's not entirely the case, but I think the price of rhodiola was $12 a pound, and it's now $48 a pound. I could see it probably being $75 a pound. It's fun to teach people how to grow things. The thing about horticulture, it's a lifelong endeavor. You never stop learning. And horticulture is one of the broadest scientific fields you can imagine. There's no way anyone can know the depth of horticulture. So the best you can do is pick one little sliver that you're going to specialize in and become good at that. So for example, my passion is growing giant cabbages.
What's the biggest cabbage you've ever grown?
52 pounds. God, it was probably 3 or 4 feet across. The big thing I do with it is I enter the Alaska State Fair giant cabbage weigh-off. And that's kind of like Alaska's professional wrestling. Like I've told you many times before, when I read your proposal, I was so impressed. And people at the Division of Agriculture didn't select yours. And I was like, this is the kind of project that we want to go after. And so I was able to convince them to fund your project. And so I've been really happy to hitch my wagon to yours. I had no idea, where this would take us. The adventures you and I have had, from Canada to Germany to,
Right.
all over the state.
Right.
It's been
To
very
broken down trailers hauling rhodiola
Yeah.
back.
People are excited about it. Most of the farmers in Alaska, I would say, are under 30. Younger people are actually getting into farming, especially in Alaska, more than any time in my life. It's because they want a lifestyle that's different. People they want to get back to the earth, being a farmer, living off the land. They're tired of corporate industry and stuff like that. And so they just want to grow things. And they're not so interested in making a lot of money, just, making enough to get by. I first noticed it about 15 years ago when a young couple came in here and they wanted to learn how to farm, but they had never worked on a farm. They had no farm experience, and they wanted to know, how could we teach them how to do that? I didn't know what to say to them because I'd never met people like that. And now they come in all the time.
Well, we came up to Alaska in 2002, lived in Eagle River for 18 years. I was looking to change career paths, and we were looking for some space and wanted a different place to raise our kids with more space. And we both grew up on farms.
My advice to anybody building, I don't care if you're young or old, live within your reason. You have to think about buying a piece of remote property, and you have to think long and hard on it. You want to buy a piece of property, make sure you have the funds to get the necessities that make you feel comfortable. Do I have children? If I don't feel adequate in homeschooling, how are they going to get there? If you like to have a hair dryer in the morning, then you need electricity.
We put our house on the market and we bought this shop, which was really good. We were in the fifth wheel for a summer. I told them 2 months max. And then we rented from a client who just bought a house that had a downstairs duplex. They came, they're like, you can't stay in here, come rent from us. I'm like, it'll save my marriage, definitely.
Do not try to live in the building that you're working on. We're living out here with garden hoses for water and extension cords for electricity. It just about ruined our marriage.
Think about showering in an RV. You get wet, you turn off the water, you soap up, and then you rinse. So that's what we did for 2 years. So it was really nice to take a 45-minute shower again. Fifth wheel life is a little like you've got a kid that squirms in the bed and it rocks your bed up front. So you really don't like squirming children. So it's a very interesting life. And as a mother, being very sensitive to movement. So it was an adjustment, but we made it work. Yeah. We really did.
Pete and I are mixing concrete by hand with rainwater to build our footing for the house. And we got a frame together with no windows or doors.
All we had for windows were those 2 windows in the garage door. So it was very, very dark in here that winter, and that was a really hard winter.
Well, we did everything except for finish the concretes. We did all the clearing. This was all forest up here, so we cleared this area and put the driveway in and had to run power up here. We drilled a well down below first, and then we drilled another well up here because it's kind of far to run water.
We had a folding ladder that the kids got up and down on, and they were allowed to have a porta potty upstairs, which their brother had to empty very difficultly. We lived in that cabin with no water, no electricity, and I could throw water up in the air and it came down as icicles. I said to my husband, can we leave? And we were too poor.
I actually worked for the Division of Ag up here. I used to work in marketing there. And so when I did that, right as I was leaving, I actually wrote a grant for Rhodiola. So I was familiar with it. But then I left shortly after that and had kids and life went on. So I had never really followed up with it. And I actually had some plants from Petra that I had in my garden growing. And so I knew what it was. So my friends had done that. So I was like crunching numbers. I'm like, you know what? You could make this lucrative. You could make money at it if you can figure it out. And a lot of people are really hesitant to get in it, I think, because it's so cost prohibitive. Like we will have well over $500,000 into this operation before we ever make a dime, because you have so many years before you get a crop, right?
We bought these 5-acre parcels in succession just to keep people from squatting. What could we grow out there that could be beneficial and earn you some money? I said, well, everybody is doing peonies. And it was just the overwhelming physical labor of putting up fencing and wind barriers and things like that. I said, they are a beautiful flower, but I'm not young enough to do that anymore.
Growing up on an almond farm, people call them almonds, salmon, okay? Growing up on an almond farm, you plant and you have 4 years to production. So for me, it didn't feel unfamiliar at all. We have older equipment, but Tom is a mechanic and he can do carpentry, he can do plumbing, he can do electrical, he can operate equipment, he can mechanic on it all. So he's everything. He does everything around here. And so his abilities make all of this possible, right? My goal is to have at least 20 acres in production. I want to build a processing facility, and I want to develop a marketing, and I want it to be all Alaska grown. So I want to have product development off of our processing facility. Like that's my long-term goal. I might be 85 when I achieve it, but I fully intend to achieve it. There's been times it's been discouraging. There's been times, because we had our seedlings in our trays for so long. It was so painful. We've had conversations. Is this what we want to do? I'm like, we're doing this. I don't care. We're doing this. We have so much in this. We're just going to do this. So anyway, I continue to be excited about it. And I think the product is going to be amazing. I like what Rhodiola can offer as a product. I'm particularly interested in the skincare portion as I get older. I would really like that anti-aging stuff.
Ground zero, the experimental test station, was my front yard. Literally, my house was surrounded with rhodiola plants. I took photographs, I dug them up, I would measure them, I would take pictures. I had a whole series of PowerPoint presentations every year of how they improved and grew and whatever I could interest growers in. When I started harvesting my own plants, we had to learn whether or not they were marketable. Number one, the size of the root, of course, because the bigger the root, the more valuable that plant, and all the tricks that would have to go into that to get root to increase in size. But more importantly is the rosavan and solidricide concentrations. We knew that you needed to have at least 1% rosavans or higher to be worthwhile harvesting. Some of it was funded by grant money, some of it was personally funded, but to help the farmers understand when they could harvest. And when they could harvest has to do not just with the age of the plant, but also what time of the summer, early summer or in the late summer. So these were all research that we were doing. My living room was basically my experimental station. I had a 30-ton hydraulic press in my living room. My dining room table was consumed with mason jars of tincture in various stages of processing. I mean, if you came over for dinner, we had to sit at the kitchen counter because my dining room table was just basically loaded up with stuff. Also grinding it, bottling it. I did all of this at home first literally with a turkey baster and slapped the labels on myself. It would be printed off of my, little desktop printer. And so that was how we created our initial products. And what gave me the confidence to move ahead was that people loved it. I mean, I would get people calling me and emailing me telling me how much it's helped them. They may not have liked the taste because, it's a root and it's made with alcohol, and so it has kind of a bitter tannin sort of aftertaste, but they would tell me how much it's helped them. And so I knew we had a good deal. So if it can help our customers and our clients and it can help the farmers, I mean, what's not to love about that?
I've set this up over the years, so this has been a process of maybe 3 years, and it's gone through different modes. I had them in these trays. Basically, they were underbed totes, and that just wasn't a good system. And so I found a different configuration for the misters. I used to have them in a square firing in, and now I got them in a T firing out, and that makes a difference. And so I'm slowly developing my whole process. And this, I think, is going to be a system that I won't have to modify. My investment's not that much. I'm retired. And so for me, it's more of a hobby to play around and experiment with. I love biology, genetics. Botany is one of my favorite classes when I was an undergraduate. And so to me, it's just kind of experimentation, and I'm not looking at it to make a lot of money. There's a lot of people that have large farms, and they are able to make some money. My wife had a neurodegenerative disease, and so I started doing research into different things that might help because there was no cure available in normal medicine. And I came across this study where they had fruit flies that were given the disease that my wife had had, and they were not able to climb up on the side of test tubes. These were fruit flies. So they gave them an extract of rhodiola. All of a sudden, those larvae of fruit fly were able to climb up on the sides of the test tube and make the pupa they needed to make in order to hatch. Seems to be rhodiola increases mental stamina, where people are able to accomplish things that they're normally not able to accomplish. So that's why I got into it, to find something to help my wife who had this disease. I taught biology for 40 years in high school, and I've also got a degree in biological sciences. I love genetics, did very well in genetics. These plants grow very fast in the springtime when the snow is melting and freezing at night and melting. And that seems to trigger a mechanism for them to grow fast. So these little clues to me are fascinating. What I do is I take these plants and I put them into dormancy by freezing them. During the daytime, I put them out of a cooler that has ice in it and let the sun shine and warm them up. And then at night, I shut the cooler with ice, and then they cool down again. And I put them in a sugar bath with some hydrogen peroxide, and it's amazing how they come out. My success is watching these things grow fast, cutting the time down to 3 years, and developing what I call a cultivar, which is a superior plant. I call them super growers, where I select plants that grow fast and produce the desired product in the rhizome, which is what they put into teas and tinctures, and also use it as an herbal product. Failure would look like a lot of rain, crops that are getting aphids, crops that are starting to rot, which can happen, but that's not happening right now. Right now, I think things are going very well. What I do is periodically I look at the roots, and the roots are a good indicator of the health of the plant. And so if I see a change in the roots, it's either I'm mixing the fertilizer wrong or the temperature is a problem. And I found that the temperature at 67 degrees is okay. And for a long time at 67 degrees, everything's fine. But it hits 69 degrees and boom, the whole tray, all the trays begin to turn brown and the plants go into a stress mode. And that makes a lot of sense because they're Arctic plants and alpine plants where it's cooler. We're ordering some thermometers that hook together with Raspberry Pis. And so as soon as it gets above that certain temperature, it'll set off an alarm on my phone. This is something the average person could do with some qualifications. At first, I was having trouble because 100 psi is a lot of pressure. And if you get something wrong in your pipe connections, you really know it. I mean, it'll spray all the way across the garage and hit the ceiling and drip down. And so 100 psi is quite a bit of pressure. And so you have to be really good at plumbing, so to speak. The temperature issue is something that I fight any year that it gets warm. And this year I'm fighting it. Last year I was also fighting it. But I found why my plants were dying. And just finding the cause of that is a big step.
We have years. Some years are nothing but rain. Last year was a very rainy, cloudy, dreary summer, and things still grew because the rain is good, of course. And now this year it's dry, and I worry about our temperatures here. I really worry.
I actually do think that climate change is going to affect it because the ground needs to be below 68 degrees.
One of my professors took us on a field trip, and we interviewed some Alaskan Native folks that live up on the Nenana River. It was a hole in the ground held up with birch timbers. That was their refrigerator. And he pulled the cover off and he said, "We can't use this anymore," and it was mud at the bottom. That long ago, I was still in school, yeah, a good 25, maybe 30 years ago, climate change had already started to affect us here inland. It's even so much worse out on the coastal regions where they depend on permafrost.
Up by Fairbanks and the interior, they may have more heat in the summertime than we do. And that may become a problem for people that are growing rhodiola up there.
I think we're going to be so hot here, even in Alaska, things that grow here now won't survive. I don't know about rhodiola. We have delicious potatoes, carrots, and beets. I think it's going to be too hot for them.
This is a plant that's gotten stressed out because it's gotten too warm. You can notice that the chlorophyll is beginning to leave the leaves, and that's a sign that we have a stressed plant. And that's what happens when you reach 69, 70 degrees. Up by Fairbanks and the interior, they may have more heat in the summertime.
I see little things happening like rhubarb going to bolt in early May. Rhubarb's not supposed to do that until the end of the summer in August when it gets really hot. Well, we're really hot now in May. 3 days ago, we were 87 degrees here, and that's hot for us.
What you have to do is keep them weeded because in their normal habitat where they grow, up high above the tree line where other plants can't. But you bring these plants down to where humans live, they can't compete with the dandelions and the weeds and the horsetails and things like that.
It takes a very, very dedicated farmer to grow it, and the weed problem is difficult to deal with.
I mean, the weeds are significant competition to our plants, so we need to be weeding these fields right now.
My biggest concern was weed control.
I can be here the 3-4 hours just taking care of it, weeding the grass out of it.
He hates pulling weeds. I can go do mindless weed pulling for hours and not care. He's like, I'm done.
We would need probably 8 to 10 people working 40 hours a week to keep all the weeds out of it.
Bent over in grubby, dirty clothes, and I'm picking weeds.
I would love to have a farm that is weed-free.
Weeding is important during the first 2 years because grass will take over and choke it to death.
If they're competing with weeds in the same ground, they're not going to grow as fast.
A lot of people are using the black plastic where the rhodiola grow through holes.
All the plants are growing on green IRT plastic.
I knew about Typar. It's $400 and some a roll.
But weeds grow in those holes also.
Lo and behold, they came back and they just continued to grow.
I found a machine made in the UK. It uses like lasers and different really cool technology, and it verifies the weeds, identifies them with however it identifies them, and zaps them with lasers. But it was $1 million, so we couldn't afford it.
I just try to keep the weeds out. But dandelions are very frustrating because they grow right in with the rhodiolas. But the best rhodiolas grow where the dandelions are the biggest, which is kind of a dilemma.
End of the day, you can look at it and they say, well, I see I accomplished something. My 2 rows are clean now, or 3 rows are clean.
When you get weeds growing for 5 years and you can't separate the weeds from the plant, that becomes an issue.
Harvest season is usually wet, rainy, and muddy, and we've had people standing in their knees up to their knees in mud.
We're on the farm called Flying Moose. When I was developing this property, I was ready to go home, and big ass bull moose walks out of the forest and raven flies over the top. And I said, well, be a flying moose since I have no other names. I'm a farmer, water operator. I get up at 5 o'clock, have a coffee with my wife, and she goes to work and I head to the farm. Sometimes I have a breakfast in the morning, sometimes I don't. Then I come home for a breakfast at 6 o'clock p.m. My dad used to have about 4 cows, milking cows, and we had about 12 siblings, and he was working low-wage jobs. So I had to put myself into a work and cut hay. We grew up in a town named Nikolaevsk. My dad was a pioneer who opened the village. We came to Alaska in May 1968. Into the forest with no road, just a little moose trail. We had a lot of fun. The forest was our playground. We didn't have to worry about anything. Like nowadays, people are afraid the kids might get hurt by moose, bear. Those days, we didn't care. We just explored the forest. You grow up in a place where there's nothing exists. You just walk out the back door, you're in a free country. There's nobody to stop you. We even chased moose around, which we're not supposed to, but we did. Different people were different. We had more of our own people, like say Russian Orthodox or Russian people, compared like right now. See, when we grew up, you walk outside, all you see is just Russian kids running around like little bugs in the streets. Nobody around. But look at it now. You walk out to the street, all you hear is barking dogs and motorcycles driving around. There's no peace at night. So, as you guys seen, my daughter worked with me today, and I have another boy who is working in the hospital. We train them from the young age. They have to take care of themselves. And she was more like my little tomboy. She played the basketball like everybody liked her, and so I treat them all the same. We were watching the news with my wife, and I was construction steel, and I came home at 6 o'clock in the evening. She says, hey, there's some good stuff. I said, what stuff? She says, something Rhodiola. I said, so what good about it? She says, you can plant that suckers anywhere, they'll grow, the moose won't eat it, bears don't, nobody eats it. I said, that's my plant. So we looked it up on a website, looked it up, and finally we found it. Alaskan Roosevelt says Petra Illig, so within her website, we found her, and then it says the starters you can buy from Anchor Point Greenhouse. So I went about 8,000 starters. It's something I can find out and be proud of it, and then I can tell people later. I mean, if you tell them, well, I know this, and something goes wrong, and it doesn't come out to what you expected. And then they can say, oh, you're just a liar. But once you prove the point that you can grow or do something, and it comes out what you wanted, then you can tell people about it. So the happiest moment when I harvest them, process them, and ship them to the company, and then the big check comes back. Then I say, I'm rich. Even if it says $10 on it, I still say I'm rich. It doesn't matter how much hardship you put in there, but it's just something you see the results you accomplished. I'm an 8th grade quitter. Went back to school, got my GED, and stayed with that GED. Then I attended 2 classes, one woodworking, and one was computer programming. I worked on that for 3 semesters, and I said, hell with it, that's boring. Not enough money then. But now I wish I was back in there, sitting at the computer working with it. But it is what it is.
This is where it all started. In 1976, my dad was getting sick, and so my brothers and I got together and built this greenhouse for him because he liked growing stuff. At first, he tried growing tomatoes in here, had a bumper crop of tomatoes, but we all threw them out in the field and plowed them under because we couldn't sell them. During his time messing around in here, he found a formula for making compost out of fish waste and seaweed. He came up with a formula for mixing it with peat to make a good potting soil, and then he decided he was just going to sell potting soil. So he got bread bags and filled them up, put a sticker on them, put them on empty shelves and stores all up and down the peninsula. At the time, I said, Dad, you're crazy. Who in the heck's going to buy dirt? It's all over the place. I said, that's about as dumb as selling water. And guess what? Water seems to be a big thing. Soil seems to be a big thing, so.
So what's this?
Well, if you come up here, I'll tell you. This is a big refrigerator. It's actually started out just to be a root cellar. Our ground is cold enough that naturally it stays between 38 and 40 degrees, winter and summer all year round. Peonies have to be stored at 33 degrees. I couldn't get that cold, so then we had to add a $20,000 refrigeration unit to drop it 4 degrees or 5 degrees in here to get it down to the right temperature. And this is all Stosh's rhodiola. So while he's waiting for the dehydrator to dry his first batch, you got to keep these things cool so that roseavans don't degrade. So we're able to hold these until we're ready to process them. And that's a rhodiola root. And of course, Petra's working on a process that might make that a lot faster. And Stosh is working on a process where he's direct seeding the ground, and it seems to be having quite some good success. So we're going to start a new field. And by the time we're ready to harvest our first harvest, I will be 80 years old. Never quit. Anyway, what happens if I quit? Well, hopefully somebody will take over. If not, well, that's the way it goes. Life. Oh, I'm hoping my kids take an interest eventually. They're out there trying to take over the world, you know, like all young people do. And once they get sick and tired of that, maybe they want to do this. I lived in a trailer house back here in the trees until all my kids left. They graduated from high school and left. Then I built this house.
Why'd you wait till they left?
I didn't have any money while they were here. They took all my money. We had a small retail store inside of, and that's where my mother operated. And then after she passed away, I decided we needed a larger retail area. So I built this. And in the meantime, I ran into Petra, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do with the upstairs area. We were thinking about canning and blanching vegetables and stuff. And then Petra rolled around and said, we need someplace to make tincture. And I said, we can do it upstairs. We met in a workshop. She says, I have a new plant that all you farmers should grow. Got me all excited about it, and then asked for a volunteer to plant seeds. It's like life. It's an adventure all in its own, but it just adds to my adventuresome life, I guess. It's pretty cool. It's a really neat thing. A lot of people my age, I see them all the time. They're at the senior center and everything else, and they really don't have any purpose anymore. They lose their purpose. I think I've got a purpose for at least until I'm 100. So we're going to keep going. I was a high school teacher for 20 years. It was my passion. I loved teaching. It was a great deal. But my parents got sick, and I didn't want to lose the legacy that my dad had started with this soil. I said, well, I was teaching it, but I don't know if it was all BS or not, so I just started trying it, and it actually works, so here we are.
Actually, the first time I heard about rhodiola was when Al approached me to take over the lab. It was just kind of one of those, he come to me and he says, hey, you want to work for the winter? And this is what we've got. Al was my husband's wrestling coach and school teacher. We came in to say hi, and I started at the greenhouse. I have a girlfriend that was, she was in a kind of ugly place in life. And I bought a bottle, and I took it home, and I gave it to her. And I'm like, just give it a shot. Just try it. And now she orders on a regular basis because she's doing incredible. And I love that. I love that I can come on board at the very bottom of this and start with, turkey basters and fill-in bottles and just see where we're at now. And I love the fact that I've had a hand in that. I love seeing a video with somebody that's got a bottle and to stop and think, I've had my hands on that. There's a very plausible chance that I touched that bottle. And it is. It's pretty, it's almost shocking to me because you're like, wow, that's, here, or it's there, or it's, and it's actually pretty phenomenal. It really is. To know that I took it from a dry product and took it all the way through, and then it's almost like, I produce this baby and then I send it out the door, and all of a sudden it's in California or it's in Texas or it's, almost mind-baffling to me that I had a hand in that. It's pretty incredible. I'm sure at some point I'm going to have multiple help, at the rate we're going. I'm sure we're going to have to be, I'm sure our equipment's going to improve. Our flow's going to improve. I'm sure the lab's going to change probably a dozen more times. We just went into a whole new press to try to speed things up and move things along, and right now that's a learning curve. But it's new, and it's, it's the next step. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for giving me the ability to do and having faith in me. And thank you for letting me be on the ground floor of this. I love it, and it makes me proud, and I just thank you.
About 2 weeks ago, we shipped out our 50,000th order online, and it's all because of you.
I don't know. That's kind of crazy numbers to me. That kind of just took my breath away, actually, because I see bottles one at a time. I didn't realize that I'd put that many bottles through here. Honestly, that's pretty incredible because, like I said, my breakdown was one bottle at a time. I know I got 90 bottles in a case. I know my boxes hold 54. Hey, I need a pallet. Okay, I got 10,000 bottles coming. Okay, cool. I know I track numbers. I'm going to probably eat on that all day long because that's pretty incredible to me.
Hi, Dawn.
Well, hi, Petra. How you doing?
Good. How's it going?
Awesome.
Your delivery.
Awesome. We're so excited. Everybody likes a local product that's high quality.
And we work really hard because we work directly with the farmers and make sure it's all pure. And
well, we got a lot of customers here that really enjoy your products. So it's a big benefit.
Well, that's what keeps me going, right? Keeps the growers happy.
so I'm really in a phase right now where we're desperately trying to encourage more farmers, because at the current supply I'm getting, relying on right now mostly Jonathan Peters in the Kenai. He is able to produce about 1,500 pounds a year of dried root with his current acreage, and that gets us to about 80,000 bottles a year. But that's not enough for places like Whole Foods, which I'd really like to crack that market, because you'd need a lot more for that.
When people come in for the first time, they're amazed at what we have and how big we are. We look a lot smaller on the outside. A lot of people take it for stress and mood management, a little bit of energy, a little better sense of well-being. We try to carry as many as we can. I mean, there's only so many things that actually grow in Alaska that are commercially viable, so it's kind of limited, but when we can, we absolutely do.
I like to eat things where I know where they come from. I don't want to get things from another country and consume them.
Not everyone, but a lot of people like me are willing to pay more if it's grown here in Alaska as an Alaska-grown product versus if it's imported. I'll pay more if it's grown in Alaska.
I would buy something at a farmer's market grown in an Alaska farm over a certified organic something that came from the States because I know it's from here, it's fresh.
I think one of the things that we do that's very good in that way is our Alaska-grown logo. Very recognizable throughout the agriculture industry and the vegetable industry. It's on the Rhodiola packaging as Alaska grown. The more we can do with that, the better.
Petra and I were just talking about certified organic, and I thought to myself, as long as it's Alaskan grown, I know it was probably grown consciously. We don't use a lot of fertilizers, we don't have pollution, that kind of thing. So I don't know, I think it's better. I mean, we do have the best carrots. If you've never had Alaska carrots, they are the best, sweetest carrots, and they're the only carrots I eat. Doesn't matter compared to any organic from anywhere else. I don't know, it's just the soil, somehow.
So I've not even seen this. This is from...
I found that.
Oh, right.
I found that in Germany at the most podunk little train station you can imagine. And it was Rhodiola eye cream. And I thought,
I love it.
If they're selling stuff like this at a train stop,
right,
there's got to be something to it.
Well, that's why we are so interested in taking our liquid extract, which is basically a tincture. The next step is to produce a dry powdered extract. That way we can manage each batch and know exactly the concentration of rosavins in there, so we can build up capsules in a standardized dose. And then we can also use that dry powdered extract to make other products like skincare. And the beauty with things like skincare is because of you don't need as much rhodiola. If you take it internally, you need a larger dose to get to all your body tissues. But if you're only applying it topically, you only need like parts per million. So you can really stretch that out.
So we are currently building out the lab for capsule production in Anchorage. It's underway. And then we already have the major equipment that we need. We will just kind of wait until our construction crew can get us ready to roll. And then it's going to be me in there really kind of fine-tuning the process. I think a full batch might take 1 to 2 days. And that's this is tiny. The equipment that we have to produce at scale is massive. So this is a cute little, I think it's a 5-liter rotovap. It works great for the small amounts that we have been doing. When we are at scale, we have a big, I think it's a 20-liter, so it's a huge machine. It would not fit in here. It requires almost 8 feet tall. I think it can handle 15 liters at a time, or 20 liters. I can't remember the specs off my head. My husband and I, we lived in Denver, and there were a lot of opportunities for chemists there, and there's just a lot of great opportunities. I worked in renewable energy for a while, and research and development for renewable energy, and that was absolutely amazing. Starting the CBD company kind of gave me a little bit of chemistry to play with. It gave me a little bit of math to do. It gave me a little bit to figure out. And then that really kind of led to this consulting business. A lot of people kind of just dismiss chemistry as too hard. But when you really kind of look into the concepts behind it, it's really not. I mean, for some people it might be. It's really fun for me for little kids to think something's magic, and then I'm like, no, it's science. And they are just mind blown.
I don't think I needed to prove anything to anybody, maybe to myself. I wanted to leave sort of an indelible positive mark. You know, one thing about in Alaska, you can be a big fish in a little pond. If you're a doctor in Seattle, which I was, you know, you're one in a sea of a million residents, right? But one of the reasons people do come up to Alaska, other than to escape the IRS or the law, is because they have an opportunity to actually do something worthwhile within their sphere of influence. Mind you, I'm not saying that it wasn't difficult. I spent 15 years every day thinking about rhodiola, what's the next step, coming home after work, spending hours doing whatever needed to be done that day. I'm not saying it was easy or effortless, but it was just sort of like the right plant at the right time in the right community environment. It needed nudging and push, but it flowed. And it was so different from other things that I might have tried where, oh, this is a great idea, and you come up against a brick wall and you try to force it through. But rhodiola was sort of like they didn't have to force into an agriculture setting here. It just likes it here. Demand for rhodiola was increasing, and so the prices are starting to come up, and then before you knew it, the plant was considered an endangered species, so companies have to shift from getting their products from wild collected harvest to cultivated. Every time I saw a challenge, it kind of like opened up another way. I don't believe in fate, but I believe that you create your path by being open, being positive, and creating an environment where people want to participate. You know, when people ask me, how do you have the time and the energy for it? I tell them two things. Number one, I take rhodiola, which gives you a lot of energy, and I don't have a man in my life to slow me down. I'm pretty happy so far. I don't feel yet that I really am ready to rest on my laurels. I think there's still a few more years of work to be done, primarily in helping farmers figure out the best way of cultivating. And there's still some questions that need to be answered to help them be as successful as they can be. I'm amazed that it's come to this. I never thought 15 years ago, I thought 15 years ago I'd still be experimenting in my front yard.